I want to focus on the major signs, at least for the purposes of this podcast. So we have the first one, which is the arrival of the Dajjal. The Dajjal, the Prophet ﷺ says, will arrive when he's no longer mentioned on the pulpits.
Yes.
And so let's use this pulpit at least to talk a little bit about the Dajjal and what people need to know.
I have a Dajjal khutbah, and every now and then I'll bring it out, and I call it my way of keeping that sucker back. So I gotta do something, right?
Yeah.
And then he comes, you know, it's interesting. There's a hadith that says the Dajjal will come out due to an extreme anger that he feels. And but the hadith doesn't say why is he so angry. And I found one scholar who has the probably the best approximation to why he was so, because he says if you look at it's a really good analysis from him. He says if you look at the hadith and the events right before the emergence of the Dajjal, it is like insane victory after powerful victory for the Muslims. And then they conquered Constantinople without firing a single arrow, just by mentioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until one side of it collapses. Then they mention and make dhikr of Allah, they're yelling it out till the other side collapses. Then the third part collapses, and then they conquer it without shooting a single arrow. And then right after that, it's actually the shaitan that cries out that the Dajjal has come out amongst your families. So then the scouts go to check the news, and when they get there, they find out that it's false, and then the Dajjal does come out. So he says, look when he comes out, and the extreme anger, Allah knows best, but it's a good estimation or a good guess, that the extreme anger is due to these powerful victories, one after the other, of the Muslims, and he becomes angry and he comes out. Because if he's trapped in an island, what's the anger? Like he's getting the news of these amazing things that are happening to the Muslims, and then he comes out.
Is he an exemption to the idea, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says that nobody who's alive right now will exist past 100 years, and that the Dajjal has been chained in that island since the time of the Prophet ﷺ?
Yeah, the hadith is speaking about natural and normal people. This is the case, that you will not live beyond a certain age, and that's it. And the Dajjal is an exception. He's not, I don't know if anyone will argue he's just a completely normal human being. Really? When was the last time you saw someone like him? So he's clearly an exception. Everything about him is an exception. There's nothing about him that's like the average person, So, and people always say, sometimes it's speakers, like I saw the speaker, and he's not like a classically trained individual or anything, but he always markets himself as, this is in the Arabic language, so don't go looking for him in English, but he always markets himself as the rational, logical, scientific-based analyst. And he says, if the Dajjal has been alive since the time of the Prophet ﷺ, by the time he comes out, he's going to have cataracts, arthritis,
How logical.
Yeah. And the scholars answer that. They said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not allow time to take its toll on his body. And then they give the example of the young men in the cave. They slept for 309 years, but what's the evidence that time didn't take its toll on their bodies or affect their bodies? Because they said, how long were we asleep? And then one of them says, a day or two. But if time took toll on their bodies and effect, then they would wake up and they would clearly see each other with long hair, long nails, horrible breath, and
white hair,
and they'll be like, hey, I think we've been asleep for more than a day, So yeah, these are examples of people, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has that ability, and this was his plan. So the Dajjal is an exception to many of the rules.
Sheikh, what's the world of the Dajjal? He emerges, so you have the army of the Mahdi, but at the same time the Dajjal is coming out in a world that's filled with drought. 1/3 of the earth withholds its rain. The first year, the second year, 2/3, the third year, no rain. And that's the year that the Dajjal comes out, and he's controlling vegetation's growth and the bringing down of rain, all of that by Allah's permission as a test.
Yeah. And so yeah, he's able to perform these things that are out of the ordinary, to say the least. And they're not considered miracles. You know how the scholars say, like, the miracles or the ayat, which is a stronger word than just mu'jiza, right? So Allah gives these ayat to his prophets, and they are upon the truth, they're upon righteousness, and then they use these ayat to further prove the veracity of their message, right? And then you have the opposite. They said, وَقَدْ يُجْرِ اللَّهِ, Allah can cause something out of the ordinary to happen at the hands of someone only to embarrass him. Like when Musaylim al-Kadhab would try to perform his miracles, they would work in reverse. But they're still out of the ordinary, like when he spit the water into the well, expecting the water to rise, and it instantly started to disappear. Like, okay, now which human being has the ability to make water disappear? But it's a reverse miracle. It doesn't prove that he is righteous or anything. And then, or they said the third category is to test, like as a test. So the Dajjal has these powers, not because he has any quality in and of himself that allows him to have these powers, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make his test a very difficult test, he gave him these abilities with which he would try to convince people that he is the creator. And so when he causes it to rain, or he causes whatever is of gold and gems under the ground to come, and the hadith says it will follow him like a swarm of bees, that ability Allah gave it to him so his test becomes strong. And if some stranger walked up to you now and says, I'm the creator of the heavens and the earth, the first thing you're going to say is do something. Levitate, fly, make something materialize in your hand. Which, by the way, one time we were giving dawah in Washington, D.C., and this guy said, no, we don't need to worship a god. We're all gods. He said, I am God. So we all, in the same voice, we all said, fly. And he got so mad. He said, why is it every time I tell people I'm God, they ask me to fly? It's like everybody's been asking. Muslims, non-Muslims, everybody just says fly.
Yeah.
Because they expect you to be able to do something out of the ordinary if you're not an ordinary human being.
Yeah.
So the Dajjal, if he didn't have anything out of the ordinary with him, then he wouldn't be much of a test. Everyone would just be to get out of here. So that makes it a powerful test. I know I went off from what you had initially asked,
but I guess, Sheikh, the real question with regards to the Dajjal, I mean, we understand that it's the greatest test. The Prophet ﷺ said the greatest test from the creation of Adam is the test of the Dajjal. How does a person protect themselves from a Dajjal? What are the practical steps?
So the scholars talk about, they said, know his description, right? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he gave our ummah more descriptions of the Dajjal than any other prophet gave his ummah, because we're the ones that are going to encounter him and resist him. So he mentions that he is one-eyed, and one-eyed means one eye is not functional and the other eye is more or less functional, right? So he gave us this. So the scholar said, number one, learn his description so you can recognize him. They said, number two, learn about Allah Azza wa Jal, because if you know your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then a one-eyed man comes to you, you'll clearly say, even if you don't know the one-eyed man, you're going to clearly say, well, you can't be God, right? And then of course the first, there's a narration mentions the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, and there's one that mentions but basically memorize the first 10 verses of Surah Al-Kahf, or if you just want to be safe, memorize the whole Quran. Or the whole Quran, right? That's like one Sheikh was asked, like, how do I catch Laylatul Fajr? He said, Laylatul Qadr. He said, if you make Qiyam the whole year, you'll catch it.
Yeah, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud.
Exactly, there you go.
So, okay, so Surah Al-Kahf, and knowing the description of a Dajjal as well. And for sure making the dua as well in
the
salah.
salah.
Yeah.
You know, there's something about that dua, like when you're seeking the protection of Allah Azza wa Jal min fitnah al-Masih al-Dajjal, from the trial of al-Masih al-Dajjal. And then some sheikh comes and says the Masih al-Dajjal is the British government or the New World Order. And so what I tell people is, since 1,400 years ago, and since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, every salah, every tashahhud, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam sought Allah's protection from the British government, which didn't exist. And Abu Bakr and Umar and the companions all asking Allah's protection from the British government, and the tabi'een, and how does that
or
make
from the
sense?
television.
Or from the television.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh Allah, we ask your protection from the fitnah of TV.
Yeah.
Thousands of years before TV was invented. And that's why, again, that first point we said, like, does it fit all the descriptions or not? So you're telling me it's a new world order, and the Prophet ﷺ has been asking Allah protection from the new world order and taught us to always ask protection before the order was even put together. Doesn't make any sense.